I took another sip of my coffee, letting the warmth spread through me as I watched Joe work beneath the kitchen sink. The muscles in his arms flexed with every turn of the wrench, his dark hair falling over his forehead as he leaned into his work. I should have been focusing on the faucet. After all, that was why I had asked him to come over. But instead, my eyes lingered on the way he moved, the quiet confidence he carried in every motion. "You're too good to me, Joe," I said, breaking the silence. "Your aunt doesn't deserve such royal treatment." Joe chuckled, his deep, steady voice filling the small kitchen. "Oh, come on, Aunt Nikki. I'd never say no to you." I smirked, swirling my coffee in the cup. That's what I like to hear. I had always loved teasing Joe. He was the kind of man who didn't flinch under attention. He took it in stride, offering easy smiles and playful comebacks. But there were moments like now, when I saw something else flicker behind those warm brown eyes of his. Hesitation. A thought he wasn't saying out loud. "You're a miracle worker," I told him as he straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. "How does a young man like you not have a woman tying him down yet?" He rolled his eyes, giving me a knowing look. "You ask me that every time I see you. Well, it's a crime is what it is." I tilted my head, watching him with open admiration. "Handsome, reliable, hardworking. Not to mention you smell damn good. If I were 20 years younger." Joe laughed, shaking his head as he tossed the rag onto the counter. "If you were 20 years younger, Nikki, you'd be way out of my league." I raised an eyebrow, feigning offense. "Are you saying I'm not out of your league now?" He hesitated, his smile faltering for just a second, just long enough for me to notice. The moment stretched between us, thin as thread, fragile as glass. I could feel it there, that unspoken something that neither of us dared name. It had been creeping in for a while now, slipping into our conversations, into the way we looked at each other when we thought the other wasn't paying attention. I cleared my throat, forcing the moment away before it could settle into something dangerous. "I made apple pie," I said, pushing away from the counter. "Still warm." Joe grinned, the tension breaking as quickly as it had formed. "That's the real reason I came over," he admitted. "You know me too well," I said, turning toward the counter to slice him a generous piece. As I poured him a glass of milk, I felt his eyes on me. It was a quiet kind of watching, not intrusive, not obvious. Just there. I brought the plate to the table and sat across from him, watching as he took his first bite. His eyes fluttered closed for a brief second, a deep hum of appreciation escaping his lips. "Damn, Nikki," he said. "This is better than I remember." I took a sip of my coffee, hiding the small, satisfied smile that threatened to show itself. "Told you I'd take care of you." Joe held my gaze as he chewed, something unreadable in his expression. I could still feel that unspoken thing between us, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting. Neither of us said anything about it. And maybe we never would. Next week I paced the living room, adjusting the throw pillows on the couch for the third time. My hands felt restless, my mind buzzing with thoughts I couldn't quite name. Why had I called him over? What exactly was I hoping to get out of this? I told myself it was nothing, just a simple conversation, an excuse to see him again. But deep down I knew better. The knock came, sharp and confident, followed by the creak of the door swinging open. What would my most beautiful aunt on the planet want? His voice was warm, teasing, and just a little bit smug. I turned, already finding him leaning against the doorway with that easy grin of his. He knew I had no reason to call him here, and that knowing glimmer in his eyes made my stomach tighten. "Oh, shut up and get in here," I said, rolling my eyes, but my voice lacked its usual sharpness. Joe stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He was dressed in his usual work clothes. Dark jeans, a fitted shirt with his company's name embroidered on the pocket. I had always thought he looked good in them, but tonight, I couldn't stop myself from noticing the way the fabric stretched over his shoulders, the way he smelled. Soap, warm skin, and something else that made my breath come a little shorter. "Did something break?" he asked, eyes flicking around the room as he set his tool bag down by the door. "No," I said quickly. "Too quickly." His brow lifted, a slow, knowing smirk tugging at his lips. "So, you just wanted to see me?" I scoffed, turning toward the kitchen to avoid his gaze. "Don't flatter yourself." But I heard him step closer. I felt the shift in the air before I even turned back around. "I like knowing you want me around, Nikki," he murmured. "Stop." Something in his voice had changed. Gone was the easy, playful tone. There was something else now, something deeper. I turned to face him, my heart suddenly pounding. Joe was standing just a foot away, hands in his pockets, watching me in a way that sent a slow, delicious heat curling through my stomach. He had always been handsome, but right now, standing in my house with that look in his eyes, he was something else entirely. "Joe," I started, but I didn't get the chance to finish. He stepped in, closing the space between us in one smooth motion, and suddenly his hands were on my waist, warm and firm, pulling me in. My breath hitched as I looked up at him, my pulse racing like a teenager's. "I think you like having me around," he said, his voice low, almost daring me to deny it. I didn't. Instead, I lifted my arms, wrapped them around his broad shoulders, and pulled him in. Our lips met in a kiss that was nothing short of hungry, years of something unspoken finally spilling over. He groaned against my mouth. He pressed me against him. It had been too long, too damn long since I had felt this kind of heat, this kind of urgency. When we finally pulled apart, I cupped his face, my breath shaky, my heart pounding against my ribs. "You won't tell anyone what we did here, will you, Joe?" I whispered, my fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Joe's lips curled into a slow, wicked grin. "As you say, Auntie," he murmured. "I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. I've liked you since I was a little boy." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I should have felt something, guilt, hesitation, but all I felt was the way he was looking at me, the way my body responded to him after being starved for so long. I had always liked younger men, but this was different. Joe wasn't just some fling. He was familiar, easy, safe. And yet, nothing about this felt safe. Our affair started that night, and from then on, he didn't come over to fix anything. He came for me. At first, I tried to convince myself it was casual. Just something fun, something that made me feel alive again after too long without a man. But Joe wasn't just a distraction, he was a force. He made me laugh, made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't in years. The first time he came over after that night, I opened the door to find him standing there, grinning like he owned the place. "No leaky faucets this time," he teased. "No," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Just you." The door clicked shut behind him, and I barely had time to catch my breath before his hands were on me again, his lips capturing mine in a kiss that left no room for second thoughts. We stole time in the afternoons, hours where the rest of the world didn't exist. He would come over after work, his shirt still slightly damp from the day's labor, and I would pull him inside before he could even say a word. We fell into a rhythm, coffee in the mornings, him teasing me about my sweet tooth as I pushed a slice of apple pie toward him, and then the afternoons where we tangled together in ways I hadn't thought myself capable of anymore. Joe made me feel young again. "You're dangerous, you know that?" I told him one evening as he lay beside me, his head resting on my stomach. He grinned, tracing lazy circles on my skin. "I think you like the danger." I laughed, running my fingers through his hair. "I think I do. But I also knew it couldn't last forever." There was a quiet understanding between us, one we never spoke of but both felt. We were something that shouldn't have been, something that existed in the spaces between real life. He was my nephew, not by blood but by circumstance, and the world would never understand. But for now, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about how his hands fit against my skin, about how he looked at me like I was something worth wanting. I was thinking about how, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't lonely. Joe's body was warm against mine, his breath slow and steady as he scrolled through his phone. I traced absent-minded circles on his bare shoulder, my thoughts drifting between contentment and the nagging voice in the back of my head that reminded me of what we were doing. It had been weeks since this started. Weeks of stolen hours, secret looks, and whispered laughter that always led to tangled sheets and breathless moments where I forgot everything but him. I had told myself in the beginning that it was just fun, just a little indulgence to make me feel alive again. Joe made it hard to keep things simple. The sudden buzz of his phone against the nightstand pulled me from my thoughts. He glanced at the screen and smirked before answering. "Hey, Ma," he said. His voice that easy, relaxed drawl that always made me weak in the knees. I stiffened beside him. His mother. My sister. Joe, of course, looked completely unfazed, stretching lazily as he pressed the phone to his ear. "Yeah, I'm good," he said, his fingers trailing absent-mindedly along my thigh. "Work's fine. Nothing too exciting, just the usual calls, fixing leaky pipes, all that." I rolled my eyes, swatting his hand away. He just grinned. Then came the question that made my stomach drop. "So, Joe, what's going on in your personal life?" I heard my sister's voice faintly through the speaker. "Are you seeing anyone?" Froze. My heart pounded so loudly in my chest I was sure he could hear it. Joe tilted his head slightly, his lips curving into a slow, wicked smile as he turned to look at me. "Yeah," he said smoothly. "She's beautiful. Absolutely stunning. I can't get enough of her." My breath caught in my throat. Joe kept his gaze locked on mine, enjoying the way my eyes went wide with horror. I sat up, shaking my head furiously, pointing my finger at him like I was scolding a child. I mouthed, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" He just winked. "Yeah, Ma, I'm really crazy about her," he added, completely unfazed by my silent meltdown. I smacked his arm. Hard. Joe let out a low chuckle, but I could hear his mother prying through the phone. "Oh, really? That's great. When do I get to meet her? Who is she?" I thought I was going to have a heart attack right then and there. Joe turned his head slightly, as if thinking. I don't think she's ready for that just yet," he said smoothly, watching my reaction with amused eyes. I pressed both hands over my face, muffling a groan. "He's going to be the death of me." "Oh, come on, Joe. I never hear you talk about anyone seriously." "Who is she? Do I know her?" I stopped breathing. Joe leaned in, pressing his lips to my bare shoulder, his voice dropping lower. "Yeah, Ma. You could say you know her pretty well." I nearly died. Joe's laughter rumbled against me as I shoved him, mouthing silent threats, shaking my head in pure disbelief. He was insane. Completely, utterly insane. Before his mother could press any further, he smoothly changed the subject, talking about work, something about an annoying client, anything to steer her away. I sat there, my heart racing, barely able to process what had just happened. When he finally hung up, he tossed his phone aside and stretched, looking incredibly pleased with himself. "You're insane," I hissed. Joe just smirked. "Come on, Nikki. You like it." I gaped at him. "Like it? You were this close to telling your mother about us." He shrugged, pulling me back against him, his hands warm on my waist. "I didn't, though. I just gave her something to think about." I tried to glare at him, but the way he was looking at me, the way his hands roamed lazily over my skin, his mouth finding the curve of my neck, made it impossible to stay mad. "Admit it," he murmured, his breath hot against my ear. "You like the thrill." I swallowed hard. "Joe, this is dangerous." His lips brushed against my jawline. "That's what makes it fun." I hated that he was right. 'Cause the truth was, I did like it. I liked the way he made me feel, like I was the only woman in the world. I liked how reckless he was with me, how he didn't hesitate, didn't question what we were doing. He wanted me, and he didn't care how wrong it was. And that was what scared me the most. Because every time he looked at me like that, I knew I was in deeper than I ever intended to be. I was playing with fire. And Joe was loving every second of watching me burn. I told myself 100 times that this had to stop, that it was reckless, that we were bound to get caught. But then Joe would show up at my door, his smile easy. His hands already reaching for me before I could even protest, and every rational thought would vanish. We were careful, at least we tried to be. But passion makes you reckless. The thrill of the forbidden made us bolder than we should have been. And it wasn't long before we almost got caught. The first time was by accident. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and Joe had come over under the pretense of fixing something, though at this point we had long abandoned any excuse. He was leaning against my kitchen counter, grinning at me over his coffee, while I stood in front of him, stealing playful kisses in between sips. Then the front door handle rattled. My stomach dropped. Joe and I jumped apart like guilty teenagers, my heart hammering in my chest. "Aunt Nikki!" My sister's voice rang out as she let herself inside. I had never moved so fast in my life. I shoved Joe toward the back hallway, whispering, "Go. Hide," before turning around, smoothing my hair, and plastering on the most innocent smile I could manage. By the time my sister walked into the kitchen, Joe had disappeared into the back room. I forced myself to breathe, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary. She frowned, looking around. "You look flustered. Are you okay?" "Flustered?" I let out a nervous laugh. I was just baking. You know how warm the kitchen gets." Joe was still in the house, just feet away. If she took one wrong step, she'd find him. I held my breath as she wandered around, chatting about some event she wanted me to attend. I nodded absently, eyes flicking toward the hallway where I knew Joe was waiting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she checked her phone. I should get going. I barely resisted the urge to shove her out the door. As soon as it shut behind her, Joe emerged, grinning like the whole thing had been some great adventure. "That was close," he teased, grabbing me around the waist. I smacked his chest. "Not funny." But he only laughed and kissed me, and suddenly, the fear was gone again, replaced by that irresistible pull that always brought us back together. We didn't stop after that. But the close calls kept coming. One night, Joe stayed longer than he should have. We lost track of time, tangled up in each other, wrapped in warmth and whispered confessions that we shouldn't have been saying out loud. Then, just as he was getting dressed to leave, his phone rang. His mother again. I sat up in bed, my pulse quickening. "Hey, Ma," he answered, casually buttoning his jeans like we weren't seconds away from disaster. I could hear her voice through the speaker. "Where are you? I called you earlier." Joe glanced at me, smirking. "Just out." I glared at him. He was out, all right, out of his damn mind. "What's that noise?" his mother pressed. "Are you with someone?" Froze. Joe met my eyes, his gaze full of mischief. He was enjoying this. "I am," he said smoothly, his lips twitching. I threw a pillow at him. He laughed but didn't push his luck any further. He wrapped up the call quickly, making some excuse about hanging out with a friend, then turned to me, clearly amused. "You're going to give me a heart attack," I hissed. "You love it," he shot back, climbing back onto the bed, pulling me beneath him. "Admit it." I refused to answer, but my body betrayed me, melting beneath his touch. The truth was, I did love it. I loved the way he made me feel, alive, wanted, like I was the only woman in the world. I had spent my life playing by the rules, doing what was expected. 3 marriages had come and gone, leaving me with nothing but empty rooms and colder nights. But Joe filled my world with heat, with reckless, undeniable passion. And yet, the fear never fully went away. Because no matter how good it felt, no matter how much we both wanted it, it was still forbidden. He was my nephew. He was much younger. If anyone found out. But neither of us wanted to stop. And that was the most dangerous part of all.